It's Blue Orange 22. So as you can see from the title, this is an update on the domestic abuse bill being debated in the UK. And yes, as the title says, how feminists are trying to legalize domestic violence against men. I am fine. I got stabbed 4 days ago, but I'm okay. I hate to make this a video about anti-feminism because I always say the men's rights movement is not about being anti-feminist, and it's not, because we're not against women's rights. We're not against the idea of a feminist movement. But the problem is these kinds of stories happen all the time, and so we really kind of have to talk about it. So let's take a look and see what's going on. You might remember this video that I did on how feminists in the UK are trying to legalize domestic violence against men. That is posted in the description below. And then yesterday I saw this post on Reddit, and I did a little bit of looking into it, and I want to do a couple videos on it actually. You can see the title says, UK domestic violence bill is currently going through formulation. 7 only female charities and only female survivors, male ones barred, were allowed to help influence it, despite government's own data in the report showing nearly 800,000 victims per year. Signed petition also in comments. Now, there's a video here from Mankind. I put a link down to this Reddit post where you can see all that information. So what you just read, and this video is going to be broken up into 2 or maybe even 3 parts because there's a lot in it. But what you just read, basically, this domestic abuse bill in Parliament right now has a committee of MPs, which is members of Parliament, who are working on it. So basically think of it like a congressional committee. And this committee invited in some domestic violence charities and organizations to help them learn about it and talk about it and give them advice. But they only invited in organizations that only look at female victims. Male victims were completely cut out of the conversation entirely, 100%. There was absolutely nothing. There was no voice given to male victims or charities that work with male victims. So they were completely left out of the conversation. And this is now how the bill is being put together, without any voices from male victims whatsoever, even though you saw that 800,000 men per year are victims of domestic violence in the UK. Now it gets even worse. The first comment of this post, which is a very good comment by the way, is talking about how some of the members in that committee have actually committed domestic violence against their male partners themselves. Let's take a look. Also, I kid you not, several of the MPs in the committee have committed domestic violence against their male partners. Sarah Champion, who was actually the shadow Labour domestic violence minister, really, beat her husband and victim blamed. Layla Moran is a Liberal Democrat leadership candidate this year, and she did the same thing and badly victim blamed. Wait a minute, so 2 of the committee members on domestic violence right now, who are talking about why the bill should be gendered and exclude men, actually were abusive to men themselves, and one of them was the shadow minister for domestic violence? Like, surely that can't be true. But, so this is Sarah Champion. She's a current member of Parliament, and she is the former Shadow Secretary for Women and Equalities and former Shadow Minister for Preventing Abuse. Champion was given the role of Shadow Minister for Preventing Abuse in the Shadow Cabinet of Jeremy Corbyn in September 2015, but resigned in June 2016 following a vote of no confidence in Corbyn. However, she returned to the front bench in July 2016. In October 2016, she was appointed to the role of Shadow Secretary for State for Women and Inequalities in addition to her other posts. So she was essentially the highest ranking feminist in government and the highest ranking government official dealing with domestic violence. And she was abusive to her husband. In September of 2016, it became known that Champion had been cautioned by police in 2007 after a violent altercation with her husband while they were about to divorce. Champion admitted she had lost control and said, "I'm not proud of what happened, and I accept I was in the wrong. but I had nothing to hide. I lost control after being provoked for years, and for that I am sorry, but I felt extremely vulnerable at that moment. Now, I know a lot of people don't like the Daily Mail, but they do a lot of stories that other publications won't. And this story you know is true because you saw the direct quote from her. So you know that she was in fact violent to her husband. The headline reads, "Ex-husband of Labour's domestic abuse minister still has nightmares about her after attack during divorce. Sarah Champion was cautioned by police after attacking her ex-husband. Graham Hoyland is still disturbed by the actions of the Rotherham MP." Graham Hoyland is the husband. So this is what the friend said. "But a friend of Mr. Hoyland, 59, a best-selling author and mountaineer who was the 15th Briton to climb Mount Everest, last night accused Miss Champion of distorting the truth and playing down the incident. He told the Mail on Sunday the row was really about a prenuptial agreement signed before they wed in 1999, and suggested it was not the first and only time she had hit Mr. Hoyland. The friend said, in retrospect, Graham was stupid to have married Sarah. She was a very attractive, vivacious woman, but also very harassing and abusive during their marriage. He became terrified of her." That sounds like classic abusive pattern behavior. He goes on to say, "The argument that saw Graham call the police was over a prenuptial agreement. They both received cautions, which was something the Derbyshire police did at the time, but there was no doubt that Graham had called 999 and was the victim." Now, this was the case with MP Layla Moran. Lib Dem MP Layla Moran slapped partner at conference. Liberal Democrat MP Layla Moran has admitted slapping her then boyfriend at a party conference in 2013, leading to them both being arrested. But then this line here, in her statement, she said, "In the heat of the moment, I slapped him because I felt threatened." Now, the reason why that line is interesting, it's the same thing as Sarah Champion saying that she felt vulnerable and she was provoked. And it's the argument that feminists are using for why the domestic violence bill should be gendered and why it should really only protect women. And it's because they say that when women are violent, it's always in self-defense. And women are usually only violent to men when men provoke it, or when they feel threatened, or when they feel vulnerable. And I actually kind of showed that in that first video I did on what they're doing in the UK, which is linked below. And I'm going to be digging into that in the next part of this video, because I had the transcript of the actual bill and some of the quotes from the debate in Parliament. I know that this video didn't prove that they're trying to legalize domestic violence against men, and it's not quite like that. They're not quite directly going to say, oh yes, we think that domestic violence against men should be legal. Of course they're going to say, yes, men should be included too. But it's not quite done that way. It's done in a much more convoluted, indirect kind of way. And that's what I'm going to be kind of digging into in the next few parts of this video series. But I do find it interesting that someone who was selected to be the Minister for Domestic Violence had a case of domestic violence. And right now, 2 of the members of Parliament who are working on this domestic abuse bill are guilty of domestic abuse. And they're guilty of domestic abuse against men. And they're saying that the domestic abuse bill should mostly be applied to women. And that domestic violence is a gendered crime that doesn't really happen to men very often. Even though the reality is, in the UK, 800,000 victims are male every year. So anyway, I'm going to follow this up in the next few days. I'm going to go through those transcripts from that day in Parliament and kind of unravel a little bit what's going on. But keep up with this story. You know, read all the links in that Reddit post. They're very interesting. It explains a lot of stuff. And let's see where this goes.